each of you from all corners of the United States to our United We Vote discussion. I'm Wendy Doyle, President and CEO of United We. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit focused on the advancement of all women's economic and civic leadership. Our work consists of research, policy, and an initiative called the Appointments Project that works to get women appointed by elected officials at the city, county, and state level. Thank you for making time in your day to join us for a discussion about the political power of women and how critical it is for each of us to use our voices at the ballot box. In an effort to get to know one another, I'd encourage you to drop your name and your organization in the chat box. Again, welcome. I'd first like to begin kicking off our session by introducing Kansas City, Missouri Mayor Quinton Lucas, someone who knows a thing or two about elections. Mayor Lucas wanted to be here today, but unfortunately was called out of town. However, he made time to film a brief video and a virtual welcome for us. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you the Honorable Mayor Quinton Lucas.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining today's United We Vote event. I was raised by a strong single mother. I'm married to an accomplished and smart woman, and I'm surrounded by a team of incredible women who serve our city in the mayor's office each day. So it's a true honor to be a part of an event focused on the political power of women. The fact of the matter is that this country needs your voice and your perspective each and every day and in each and every election. Our cities, our states, and our overall democracy function best when everyone shares in it. To that end, do me a favor and take a moment to be sure you're registered to vote and that your address is updated with your local election authorities in Kansas City or beyond. Voter registration requirements and election days can vary widely from place to place, so a good place to start is the U.S. Election Assistance Commission website. It's an easy spot, vote.gov. Thanks for joining today to hear from experts about women's political power and voting. I vote because I care about our future. I hope you vote in every election too.
Thank you, Mayor Lucas, for that warm welcome and introduction. And if you're just joining us, please drop your name and the organization you're with in the chat box as a way to further get to know one another. It is my pleasure now to introduce our moderator and distinguished panel for this very engaging conversation. I'd like to first begin by introducing our moderator for today's discussion, Joni Wickham. Joni is a consultant for United We on a variety of research topics, in addition to helping expand the footprint of our Appointments Project. She is the co-founder of the public affairs firm Wickham James Strategies and Solutions, with former Kansas City Mayor Sly James, who she supported as chief of staff for almost 6 years. You may notice that her name is first. Joni has worked in federal, state, and local government and has proven herself across the country as an accomplished political strategist, communications expert, and organizational leader. She's also a best-selling author and public speaker. Thank you, Joni, for being with us. Gabrielle Wyatt is our first panelist to introduce. She is the founder of the Highland Project, an organization focused on building and sustaining a pipeline of Black women leading communities, institutions, and systems, resulting in the creation of a multi-generational wealth and change in their communities. She launched the Highland Project in October 2020 and has already announced its inaugural cohort of leaders, representing 1.5 million in direct capital investments in 15 Black women across the country. Thank you for joining us, Gabrielle. Our next panelist I'd like to introduce is Juan Ramino Sarmiento, who's currently serving as the media manager for Young Invincibles, a national research and advocacy organization. Young Invincibles champions young adults ages 18 to 34 by uplifting their voices and advocating in support of policies that advance young people at the state and federal level. Formerly, Juan Ramiro worked in the communications and policy arena at the local and national levels, including the United States House of Representatives and the office of Mayor Sly James in the city of Kansas City, Missouri. Welcome, Juan Ramiro. Our next panelist is Debbie Walsh. Debbie is director of the Center for American Women and Politics, commonly known as COP, a unit of the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University. The center is nationally recognized as the leading source of scholarly research and current data about American women's political participation. Its mission is to promote greater knowledge and understanding about women's participation in politics and government, and to enhance women's influence and leadership in public life. Thank you for joining us, Debbie. Next is Mary Barnes. Mary Barnes has over 20 years experience in the legal, education, and nonprofit sectors. Mary is the contract and compliance administrator for the Port Authority of Kansas City, Missouri, where she drafts, reviews, and executes contracts for real estate, vendor services, and construction. Mary was also appointed by Jackson County, Missouri Executive Frank White Jr. to the Pension Plan Board of Trustees. Mary is also one of our United We appointees. In this appointee role, she serves as an advocate in an effort to strengthen and enrich the lives of county employees through Jackson County's pension plan. Welcome, distinguished panel and moderator Joni Wickham. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Wendy, and good morning or afternoon to everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces and to also be able to meet new members of the United We community as well. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's get right to it. I'm going to start our panel discussion off with Gabrielle. Gabrielle, your organization is fairly new, but it's already made a remarkable impact on the lives of Black women. Part of that impact is a landmark poll that looks at the political participation of Black women. What can you tell us about the voting power of Black women?
Thanks for having me today, United We. Joni, it's great to see you. We are tremendous in our power as Black women, and it goes beyond political power. We know that we represent tremendous intellectual power. We're some of the most degreed women in this country. We represent tremendous economic power for the Black community. We're nearly $600 billion worth of economic power for this country. And in terms of political participation, we've seen that our voter registration rates since 1998 have far outpaced our male counterparts. We've showed up and we've showed out. We arguably saved democracy in the last presidential election cycle. And yet, we continue to see policies that push us to the sidelines by the same institutions and policymakers who we put in their seats. So I think, as I think about your question, Joni, I first think about it from the spirit of abundance, that we have a track record of showing up and showing out, not only politically, but in the economy and in driving tremendous impact for this nation. I think the challenge ahead for us as voters, as Black women, is how are we holding accountable those we put in their seats? And I think there's a lot of room for growth there.
Thank you for talking about how we should look at these topics through a lens of abundance. I think sometimes when you talk about political participation and the political space in general, it's easier to look at it from a deficit lens. So thank you for that really important point. Juan Ramiro, it can sometimes be difficult for people to understand why elections matter to their daily life. How would you convince a young person to register to vote and then to actually show up at the polls on election day?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here in this virtual space with everyone to get the word about getting to vote. First, I want to say that there are a number of factors that determine whether an individual will vote. First, we have to know our audience. Any self-respecting communications professional will tell you, you got to know who you're talking to. And so meeting folks where they are is so important. You will hear things from young adults and really ordinary people, such as it's so hard to vote, or frustration with politics, nothing ever changes, the world is so messed up, or politics doesn't affect me. And then lastly, another one would be electoral politics will not save us. So those are some of the things that you hear, or certainly that I hear when trying to get folks to vote. And understanding the source of their reluctance to vote informs the approach that one takes to hopefully get that individual registered and then out to vote. Now, we gotta directly acknowledge their concerns. We can't gloss over those, or you've already lost them. So when it comes to them saying it's hard to vote, beyond just helping that person, getting them to the website or voter registration form, you got to have a conversation about the state of our democracy and the laws currently employed to limit access across the country, access to the ballot box. and use that fact to illustrate the importance of their vote. Clearly, if individuals out there are trying so hard to keep you from voting, it must be important. Frustration with politics, nothing changes, it doesn't impact me. One of the ways that you can rebut that really is illustrating or utilizing the pandemic as an example for good governance and democracy. If the pandemic and the previous administration showed us anything, it was the importance of good governance, of people being effective in their jobs and competent to carry out the daily business of our democracy. Local government, for example, touches the lives of everyone every day in a way that federal policy does not. You can, if you are meeting someone where they're at and they're frustrated about the state of politics, you can certainly encourage them and remind them that local government impacts everything from when your trash is being picked up to the quality of your roads, the policies of your police department, and the quality of your roads, as I mentioned. But that is one way to remind folks of the importance of participation. But we simply cannot dismiss also the federal government's aspect and the tangible role that federal policies have and the opportunities that we can access. And then lastly, when you meet someone that may say electoral politics will not save us, it's important to remind folks that voting is one very important tool, but it is a tool. And what we have available to ourselves and our civil society to bring about the change many of us want to see today, that it's not coming fast enough. So, and that is in addition to advocacy, organizing, and direct action. I think those things are important to bring forth, to hopefully persuade an individual to get to vote and participate in our democracy, which we have to do in order to keep it.
Yeah, and you mentioned how important it is to meet people where they are. When we talk about political advocacy, a lot of us are very passionate about a lot of different issues. And it's important to make sure that we're translating that passion into being effective. And a big way to be effective is to make sure that we're meeting people where they are and educating them to bring them where we need to be. Thank you. Deb, we often see media outlets assume that women will vote for a woman over a man in a contested race. Is that assumption accurate? And what can you tell us about how women candidates message to women voters?
Well, that's a complicated question, Joni, but the simple answer is no. Women voters do not vote for women candidates just because they are women. We know that women outvote men. We know that women within every racial, ethnic group outvote the men within those groups. Women are a powerful force. And we also know that they vote differently. Women are more likely to support Democratic candidates than their male counterparts are. And that's interestingly also true within each of those individual groups. They can vary by the amount, but women are more likely to be those Democratic voters. We've seen that difference since about 1980 in what has been called the gender gap. And that gender gap can be large enough in some elections to make a difference in the outcome of the race. And sometimes even when the difference is there, the race isn't close enough so that gender gap makes a difference. We've often wondered, what is it about women that gets them to the polls in higher numbers than men? And we do think that women have a different relationship to politics and to government in particular. Women make less money than men. They have less money saved for retirement. They see themselves someday as needing that social safety net that's out there that government can provide, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, family leave, support, childcare support, all of these things that social safety net can support, which is something that the Democratic Party is more likely to support. And because there's that different relationship to government, they may be more engaged in government and see elections as particularly touching their lives. I think women candidates on the Democratic side have an advantage in that when we have found that when there's a Democratic woman running, she has a better chance of energizing and engaging those Democratic women voters. We particularly see that the group that is most energized when they see a woman that looks like them running for office are Black women who really are a powerful force, obviously, within the Democratic Party, the backbone of the party, but particularly energized when there is a Black woman on the ticket. But oftentimes, I think that Black women, and I'm curious, I'm sure Gabrielle has certainly would have something to say about this, but Black women, I think, are taken for granted as voters, and they're talked about, addressed. There's lots of outreach to Black women voters when there's an election, but oftentimes the policy, the sort of the actual what happens after that person gets elected isn't always there. And so I think it's important to make sure that women voters also hold candidates accountable, particularly when they are the ones that are making the difference in the outcome of the election.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight that you made about how women's proximity to power, to be honest, can impact their relationship to the voting process. Gabrielle, Deb really teed you up nicely here. I would love to hear your reaction to what she said, and then also diving a little bit further into telling us what issues and concerns typically drive Black women to the polls in your view.
Okay. Yes, I understand the assignment, as they say. Thank you for teeing me up, Deb. I would say two pieces. One, we certainly show up and yet do not see ourselves reflected in policy. That is just a fact. And I think about this coming out of the State of the Union, where again, we elected this individual, and yet we heard nothing, zilch, nada, very minimum about voting rights, protecting voting rights, about eliminating student debt. We heard very little about the quality of access to quality public schools, about the ability to have a healthcare system that truly respects us and ensures that we're not just surviving, but thriving, and more. And so I think that, as we vote, education around voting also needs to go through the full act of what it means when someone is in the seat, whether or not that is the candidate you voted for being the seat. And I think that that's something that we're missing, is how do we continue to hold leaders accountable, not just every 4 years. In our research last year, we sought to really tackle many of the pieces that, Deb, you laid out so perfectly as to why we're so connected to voting. And to me, it all circles around multi-generational wealth and opportunity. We sought to understand, what did this mean for Black women, and what are the opportunities and barriers that they see? And I think first and foremost, just like any other gender, race, ethnicity, we found we're not a monolith. We're not a monolith. And so when we're thinking about messaging and policies to Black women, we are not the same. We are not the same. There is differentiation. And so an example of that is that we found that at a time in which the White House was touting that the economy was back, that we had found it had not rebounded for Black women. We found that particularly for millennials, a plurality of 41%. So the economy was not back for them. And that wasn't surprising when we then saw data that some of the top items that keep Black women up at night is debt and their ability to access their educational goals without being crippled by debt. We also found, not surprisingly, that Black women are experiencing racism and discrimination at high rates. We found that over 1/3 of Black women experience racism and sexism daily. Over 1/3 experience racism and sexism daily. So again, it wasn't a surprise that the number one issue we saw that Black women wanted not only policymakers, but leaders across sectors to address was racism and discrimination that frankly was holding back the creation of wealth and opportunity in their communities. That was next to then protecting voting rights. That was then next to creating quality schools that were safe and accessible and that were affordable for Black women.
Thank you so much. Mary, you are on the ground in our democracy as an Appointments Project appointee. Talk to us a little bit about how civic engagement has opened your eyes to the democratic process.
Thank you. I have always been involved in some type of civic engagement before I even knew what the title was. I have worked as an educational advocate. I started out just tutoring reading to Kansas City Public School students. And then I also created a reading program at my local church, just to, literacy is one thing that's a big passion of mine, just to engage students and keep them reading throughout the summer. And then currently I do direct service. So I volunteer with other organizations, civic and community, that I'm a member of. And so when I looked at the opportunity with the Appointment Project, it just added the support and the strength that I needed to take my civic involvement to the next level. So as a pension plan trustee, we look at things that take place in the market and how current events can, impact the pension negatively or positively. And so we base our decisions, okay, we want, these employees to receive the best benefit, to receive the most in their pension plan. They've worked for this, they've provided service through the county. And so we want to make sure that we advocate that they receive the most or the best amount, or that taking the increases that are necessary for their pension plan. And so I've seen firsthand how boards and commissions definitely strengthen county departments and how we advocate on their behalf. And so that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have from the Appointments Project.
That's a great takeaway. Thank you. And back to Juan Ramiro. Have you and your colleagues noticed an issue or two that is more likely to drive young voters to the polls?
Certainly. I mean, and I can think of a couple, but broadly speaking, first, I have to say young people are concerned with the same issues everyone else is: putting food on the table, access to good paying jobs and career pathways, access to a debt-free education, and affordable healthcare. But at the core of all of these challenges, and I would venture to say one of the most motivating factors really is equity. The gaps we are seeing across sectors are a result of systemic inequities. People may not always use that language, but they feel it. They know it. They see it every time they turn on the TV and see the latest injustice unfold. The notion that the words etched into the marble of our monuments and our institutions rings hollow because of our reality not reflecting that, not reflecting those ideals. It's something that people are intimately familiar with, even if they don't use that exact language. So individuals that speak to those concerns are gonna be more successful in attracting young people. And when I hear that, for sure, it definitely catches my attention. And you talk to anyone, you'll sense a fire of frustration towards something that they see as fundamentally wrong. So that's one motivating factor. The second one I would say is climate change. And Young Invincibles, does not particularly handle that issue as one of our core issues. We have partners in our coalition that fight hard to affect change on the climate change front. But one need not look further than the children out on the streets demanding global substantive action, from Oslo to Texas and Austin. So you really get a sense of the magnitude of the problem and the scale of the concern amongst our youngest little humans. And so that should give you a good idea. So in conclusion, really equity, addressing the gaps that we see, cancel student debt. And then secondly, climate change.
Great points. Deb, Americans as a whole tend to vote in larger numbers during presidential elections, but as several of our panelists have told us today, local elections and midterms have a huge impact on our communities. However, we usually see abysmal voter turnout for those elections. What can you tell us about how women's overall political participation has changed over the last decade?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that has been consistent, which is that women outvote men. So that's not to say that we're voting enough, but that women are leading the way when it comes to voting. I think what we have seen over the last number of years has been chilling for voting and voter turnout. Efforts to suppress voting, to make it as hard as possible to vote. I was thinking a little bit about what Juan was saying about, for young people, it's not just in their heads that it's harder to vote, right? It is getting harder and harder to vote in various places around the country. But women have been consistently outvoting men. And that pattern, I think, points to the power of the women's vote. And I think engaging more women in this process is critical. And I think shifting the attention away from the every 4-year presidential race and even the every 2-year congressional race, as has been talked about, that local level is critically important in people's lives. And it's a level where I think people can relate more and see more directly what government is doing in their lives. And I think the partisan gridlock that we see in Washington is not necessarily what we're seeing at the local level. And I think that helps engage more people, more women, more people of color, more young people, because I think there you can really see that your vote matters. The elections may be really close, and you literally see what government is doing or not doing in your community. And I think that engages them. But I think that women get that. And I think what we need to do is mobilize more women because their lives are heavily impacted by government. And I think, as Juan was saying, it's hard sometimes to help people understand how closely connected their lives are to government, but they are. And that's how we're going to get more voters out there.
So I feel like we need a bumper sticker as an outcome of this panel, mobilizing more women. I love it. Thank you. Mary, if you would indulge us for a second, we'd love for you to be our one woman focus group. Do you think you're more likely to vote and encourage others to do so as well after your appointed service than perhaps you were before?
Yes, I voted for the first time when I was 18, and I yet remember my first president that I helped to elect. And I won't tell you who that is, so I won't give away my age, but I will definitely continue civic engagement and mobilize others to be involved in that process as well. I try to add something that I do civically each year, just not to overload myself, but I like to take on maybe something that I haven't done previously. So the one thing I want to add to my plate is actually work or volunteer during an election this year. And I'm so fortunate to work for an employer who gives us the entire day off for any election, every election. And so that's something that I would really like to do, because I think that we really do need to encourage others to get out to vote. And I would like to work with youth in voting, because many times they seem so apathetic and they don't see the connection and they don't understand why they need to vote. And so those are just a couple of things that are projects that I would like to be involved in this year.
You're going to be busy. So I have one final question for each panelist. I'd love to hear why you vote. Mayor Lucas addressed this in his opening comments, and he said that he votes because he cares about the future. So Gabrielle, why do you vote?
I vote for two reasons that are interconnected. One, I was sitting with my team today reading a reading that we share with leaders about the role of land in America in the creation of opportunity and wealth. And it tells a story about an African woman who became enslaved and was stolen from her lands, and how she had the intuition to braid seeds into her hair to bring to the US to plant in the soil, because she had the intuition that I would be here today, that Mary would be here today. And so I vote because of them, because of the sacrifices that they took to plant something that, even though they would not see it in their times, would come to fruition. And I think a lot, Juan, about you name like the terms equity. We hear them a lot today. We might not have heard them in the past, and that is motivating us to vote because we know something feels different. And I truly believe that many of the issues all of us hold dear likely will not be fixed in our lifetime. But if we do not show up at the polls, if we do not start to lay the seeds in the same way we saw our ancestors do, we will not have the next Gabrielles. We will not have the next Marys of the world continuing the work. Which leads me to the second piece, which is I believe that America is about multi-generational opportunity. And the only way to truly achieve multi-generational opportunity for myself, for my children, for my grandchildren's kids, are to structurally change the very institutions that marginalize us today. And so if we're not showing up, we're now adding to an existing challenge that we've seen amplified over the last 18 months of writing us out of democracy yet again. So if we don't show up, we will be written out actively. And that's why I continue to plan to show up. And that's why I would encourage anyone who's feeling apathetic or discouraged by this current environment to not just sit on their couch. That would be the wrong choice because we're already actively being written out. We cannot add to being written out further.
Juan Ramiro, why did you vote?
Oh, that's a layered question. I mean, I would say two things. One, overall, and then one specific one. Overall, especially recently after seeing the state of the world, and I feel so very fortunate and lucky to have been born in this country, to enjoy a liberal democracy and freedom and the potential to do more in spite of the challenges and the legacy of discrimination that our country has. I deeply believe that government can be a force for good to improve our lives, and we only have one democracy and we have to take care of it. It's sacrosanct. So I think that rings even more true today as we see the bombardments in Kyiv. As an authoritarian regime takes over a liberal democracy, that's alarming, that's scary. That's something that I thought was just in our history books, and a different order was at hand, but we see that that's not the case. So that's first and foremost one of the reasons. And second, student loan debt cancellation. I hold student loan debt, but I know many people that do. The country currently faces nearly 1.6 trillion in student debt. It constitutes a national crisis. The cost of college has skyrocketed while wages for college graduates and young people in general have stagnated over the same period. Flat wages, labor market discrimination, and the rising cost of living have made it nearly impossible for many individuals to ever fully repay their student loans. Women and people of color disproportionately shoulder the burden of student loan debt, further widening the racial gap. A crisis of this magnitude requires substantial action. The president can provide long-term relief today with a stroke of his pen. Broad student loan debt cancellation will help close the racial wealth gap, will help stimulate the economy and grow the middle class. We agree with him. We must grow the middle class, but we cannot grow the middle class without canceling student debt. We urge the president at a minimum to keep his promise to cancel $10,000 of student loan debt for all, but we also encourage him and believe that he should go big and cancel up to $50,000 in student debt and make a real material difference for millions of borrowers.
Thank you. And Deb, why do you vote?
Probably layered, as Juan just mentioned. I believe in the idea of democracy. And I feel we have come perilously close to our democracy, the demise of our democracy. And I feel more than ever that it is dangerous not to participate and not to vote, because then what we have is just even more vulnerable to some of what we saw for the last 4 years. So I think that piece of it now more than ever rings true for me. I would also say that I have a deep sense of history and what it took for women and people of color to get the right to vote. And in that sense, I feel a responsibility to exercise that vote. I don't know if all of you have just watched this past week on PBS, they released an incredible documentary about Fannie Lou Hamer, and it's all in her own words. And when you see that struggle, the idea that you would then kind of callously not participate feels like an affront to the history and the struggle that came for so many people to actually secure the right to vote. So I feel it's important for our democracy. I feel it's important as a recognition of history. And then obviously because, because of the power of government, and to give up that voice and to give up your say, I think is just an abdication of that responsibility. So that's why I vote. And for my grandkids and my kids.
Yeah, I think those personal connection points are really important. Thank you. Mary, why do you vote?
I think really, to me, it's an obligation. As a woman and a woman of color, you could almost close the book right there with those two factors. But I really see it as a sense of responsibility. When I think Deb was saying, when you look at history and you see and you learn about how all of the men and women who fought and who worked so hard for us just to have the right to vote, I see it as a responsibility and a duty. And so I want to make my voice heard at the city and state and national levels. I have a very wise mother, and she said, if you don't vote, then don't complain about what's going on in your surroundings, because you haven't done your democratic due process. So I do really see it as a right and responsibility.
Yeah, there's a great saying that voting is the rent that you pay for living in a democracy. And I think that is a very apt way to put it. This panel has been absolutely tremendous. So many different insights. I'm so grateful that you all spent some time with us this morning. I'm going to turn the controls back over to Wendy, who is going to introduce a very, very special guest that we have with us this morning. Wendy?
Thank you, Joni. And I'd like to give our thanks to Gabrielle, Juan Ramiro, Debbie, Mary, and a special thanks to Joni for moderating this just incredible discussion to really get some of the interesting issues on the table. Closing us out today is a very special guest, the Honorable Mayor Mattie Parker of Fort Worth, Texas. A fun fact about Mayor Parker is that she is the driving force behind bringing the Appointments Project to Fort Worth, Texas, when she served as Chief of Staff to her predecessor, Mayor Betsy Price, in 2019. Mayor Parker was elected in June 2021 as the 45th Mayor of Fort Worth, leading one of the fastest growing large cities in the nation. Parker has set her focus on key issues that move Fort Worth forward, including economic development growth, innovative transportation and mobility solutions, quality education opportunities for every student, and building safer, more prosperous communities. Mayor Parker is very accomplished. She is a licensed attorney with more than 17 years of experience in national, state, and local public affairs, including her service as the major policy decisions on a variety of complex issues for the mayor and the Fort Worth City Council. She was the founding CEO of Fort Worth Cradle to Career and the Tarrant to and through T3 partnership. She and her husband, David, are raising their family, one daughter and two young sons in Fort Worth. This is a great way to celebrate Women's History Month. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Parker.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and it's good to see you remotely and all of your faces. Much appreciation to the panel for sharing your very important perspectives nationally on all that's going on. Gosh, I have lots to say. We just had primary on Tuesday in Texas. We're on the brink of World War III, and there's just so much angst, I feel like, especially around the right to vote, democracy. As Juan said earlier, I feel remarkably thankful to be an American right now and to be just lucky enough to have been born in this country and to begin an opportunity. So a little bit about me, and then I'll give you some thoughts as we close out. I'm a really small town farm kid. I grew up on a family farm that my grandfather scrapped put together after World War II. When he came home, I graduated with 42 kids in my graduating class, and I was the kid that was really lucky to get to go to UT Austin on scholarships and student loans and grants. I worked every single day at UT. I wouldn't trade that for the world because it made me really scrappy and hungry to be successful. And I do try to pay it forward every day since. This country is in such shambles when it comes to the way we treat one another, the way we support one another, the ability to debate and try to find consensus, and have decorum in the way we conduct our business. It's the reason I ran for mayor of Fort Worth. As many of you probably seen in your cities, even locally, we're not protected. We don't run in partisan elections in our mayoral campaigns, but man, they want you in that box, right? And then especially now, the pendulum keeps swinging far right or far left, and it just becomes this turmoil of trying to get things done is no longer, especially in partisan lenses, okay. So in Fort Worth, we've gone through a tremendous amount of growth. We're the fastest growing city in the country. We're bigger than cities like San Francisco, and people don't even know who we are. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, come visit us in this amazing city to come see what we're doing here. It's this incredibly diverse, rich community that we're trying to tackle many of the problems that you talked about today. When I was elected mayor, I was the youngest mayor ever elected to a large city. I'm now in the ranks with Mayor Wu out of Boston, who was just elected, which is very exciting. She and I have not gotten to meet each other, but we're going to be on a panel together at South by Southwest and U.S. Conference of Mayors coming up next week, which I'm very excited about. I am the mom of 3 children. My daughter is 20 out of the house. I have an adoption story with her. And then we have 2 biological sons who are 11 and 5, that they are my priority along with my marriage. And that is different in politics. There are very few of us that are juggling that life. There's a reason why there's a generational gap. And so maybe my call to action for those of you on this call today is there are no supports, 0 supports for women in office. There are plenty of supports to get you there, but then we get so busy saying, okay, we got her there, now let's go to the next election. And we tend to forget the supports are still needed to make it possible to do this job. We've done a few things locally that I'm happy to share with Joni and the team at United We to just change the schedules. I mean, before we didn't start meetings until 7 p.m. at night in Fort Worth. Well, I don't know about you, but I'd like to be home with my children to have dinner and put them to bed. That's where I belong. And so we're trying to do the small things. I think that you can still conduct business. You can still be open to the public and still remain a responsible parent and a loving wife. The other piece I'm kind of worried about right now in COVID, I do think we had this new appreciation for the blurred lines between personal and professional, but I already see that going away. I think we all need to be really focused on what it means to be family friendly and flexible for all people. It doesn't mean you have children. Maybe you're caring for an aging parent or a loved one, right? We need to be more loving towards one another and realize that work is not the end all be all. And we're doing some really innovative work with an initiative called Best Place for Working Parents. It may be active in some of your communities. We started it here in Fort Worth. The focus there is to make sure our businesses are family friendly. There's a toolkit of information there. Family friendly may be different things for different businesses. We've tried to make it as easy for a small business to adopt those initiatives. Those are things I'm deeply passionate about, not just in politics, but also in business. The other issue I know many of you care about that just didn't come up today was access to quality early education, especially for Black women. We are seeing in Fort Worth and Tarrant County right now, the lack of access and affordability is keeping them out of the workforce, keeping them out of the ability to go back to school, and keeping them out of career paths that they have dreams about. It's not just Black women, but statistically, those are who's getting hit the hardest. And we have to focus on what that looks like. So we're starting with our earliest loved ones. All of you know the ROI is huge on this. As a Republican, I am so frustrated that we've been so late to the ball game on this. I do feel a little bit homeless. That's a whole nother conversation right now in the state of political affairs in the country. The party I saw on Tuesday night in Texas and in Fort Worth is not my party. So maybe more news to come there. But I could just share with you, those are issues that we have to watch for. And in policymaking, each of you have a lens there to think about, are we providing access to quality early education in our communities? Because I can promise you it's impacting women. If you talk to women that want to run for office and have thought about the opportunity, the first thing they're going to tell you is, how will this impact my family? How will this impact the way that we conduct our lives every single day? And that oftentimes is the impediment. So if we really want to be successful, having more women involved in the political process, more women even in appointments, boards and commissions, we have to think about the way the infrastructure is around our meetings. A good example in Fort Worth, and I talked to Joni about this before, is most of those boards and commission meetings, they may start at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Oh, they'll just blend over into 6 or 6:30. Well, I don't know about you. That doesn't work, right? I need to know weeks in advance the way my whole schedule is going to fall. But we haven't adopted a new way of life when it comes to serving in those capacities, whether you put your name on a ballot or you're in an appointed position. And the last thing in closing, that I think the value of women at the table is we are more compassionate. We do want to work together. We do want to build consensus. And when those voices are drowned out, you end up in this fiefdom mentality where we are all about the one issue over here. And because you disagree with me, we're no longer willing to work together. I use this example a lot in Fort Worth. One of my fellow council members is a woman named Elizabeth Beck. We come from different partisan lenses, different experiences in life. And when we were elected, there were articles written about us. Oh, I can't wait to watch the fireworks. Are they going to get along? And she's one of my dear friends. I respect her greatly. She's raising 2 beautiful children as a single mother. We're both attorneys. And yeah, we're not always going to agree, but guess what? Those conversations make us both stronger. It changes my ideas. I know it changes hers. And at the end of the day, we will better serve Fort Worth residents and certainly be able to go home to our own children and say, you know what? We did well today, right? We worked together. You can be proud of us as your mothers for not embarrassing you, right? And really turning into this silly political machine that you're seeing. It is an honor to serve as mayor, truly. It's incredibly exciting. Most of the time I wake up and say, what an amazing honor this is. There occasionally I wake up and say, what the hell was I thinking? This was a terrible idea. And I had momentary lapse of sanity. But it's just honestly about one foot in front of the other. Love one another. Think about the people in your circles that you're working with, that you're trying to convince to be in politics or policy. This is hard work. And I'm so fearful because of the massive focus on social media and commentary. Everybody now is a pundit. The way we're so flippant and the way we change our opinions about someone because of one headline. You will not find anyone of substance running for office. You will find people that want to be talking heads on network television, and that is it. And we're at the brink of that right now. I can't tell you how many colleagues that are so wonderful that have served their communities in different capacities, and they're about to say, you know what, I'm done, because there's no reward in it. And I heard Gabrielle talking about especially the women in our community that are most disenfranchised. Those are the people I worry about, right? Those are the people I vote for. I was really lucky to have 2 very strong grandmothers in my life. And I remember the night that Hillary Clinton lost the nomination. She was aging and she was probably not going to see another election. And her dream had been to see a woman. She later became a President Obama fan, but that's a whole nother story. And I remember her telling me her story about how she became a Navy wave in World War II and how she was raised and when she was raised in a time when women didn't have a seat at any table, right? And, you know, we just have to inspire one another to take one step forward, bring people along. I think our young people in our communities do feel really disenfranchised. They feel really lost. There hasn't been a seat at the table. I don't think the generational shift has happened. There's a reason I'm 38 and the youngest mayor in the country. Yes, I'm young, but I'm not that young to be the youngest ever elected. And we haven't started to pass the torch. So you can tell I'm a little passionate about this topic. It's so fun to be with like-minded people that are working in civic government. I would love to connect with any of you that are doing work across this country. We need you in Fort Worth. We need you in Texas also. And I think that this type of organization really focused on uniting a country around the importance of voting. There's more to come, and we will see a benefit from it, but it won't be easy by any means. So thank you for letting me be with you. My dear friend, Joni, I just love you. I miss you so much. We used to get together a lot and it hasn't happened because of COVID. So hope to see you all in person and more to come in the future.
Thank you, Mayor Parker, for those great, inspiring words, for your leadership and service, and all that you do for the Fort Worth community. We're so proud of you. And I would really like to just end today by, we celebrate Mayor Parker as, a trailblazer mayor woman, but this is Women's History Month. And at United We have a month of activities and celebrations to really engage. And we encourage you to check this out on our website. But know that there are activities in your own community. So please support women-owned businesses and really get involved and celebrate throughout the month. United We is proud to work with all women to maximize their civic leader potential on Election Day and beyond. And I would really like to close also by just encouraging you, the question that Joni asked our panelists, I vote because, and really reflect on that. I personally vote because I feel that it is my responsibility. It's a privilege and a civic duty. And I want to participate in democracy. I want to make things better for the future and for future generations. I hope you all vote in every election too. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Hi, this is Chrissy here. Can you hear me? I know I was waiting for everybody to drop off, but this has been incredible. I want to thank you guys so much for doing what you're doing. I have been watching you guys throughout what you're doing statewide in Missouri. I've met Wendy once before, or a couple of times before, but this is just really meaningful what you guys are doing. I'm running for office. You know, I think about this kind of stuff all the time. And this is what I needed today. There are other women candidates that I work with that I know were on here today. And this is the kind of inspiration that keeps us going and reminds us we can do this because we see others who are doing it and we don't feel alone in it. So thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. Thank you for sharing that. We're so glad you could join us. And yeah, we were just so pleased with this panel as well. So thank you.
Oh my gosh.
For joining us.
And if there's anything ever that I can do, I am very much looking forward to, I would love to plug in, get to know you guys better. The She Should Run group that was here before COVID, I still have my pin. I wear it on the campaign trail. I hashtag and tag them, but I don't really know what's going on that I can plug in to with them here. And you guys are here, and just, I would love to meet. And if that's something you guys would be open to, please let me know.
Absolutely, we would. Yeah, I will follow up with you after this, Chrissy. I'm sure we have your email from when you registered.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry to hijack your.
Oh my gosh, no, you're fine. I think everybody's kind of signing off. So
yes, okay.
Give you a note.
All right,
and follow up with you. Set up some time. That'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Chrissy. You take care. Bye.